Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And President-elect Joe Biden moving full steam ahead with his preparations to take office. Just moments ago, meeting with mayors from across the country, even as President Trump remains behind closed doors and continues to block the official presidential transition. Today, Biden also naming the first members of his cabinet, along with a handful of national security staff, a roster of experienced players in Washington, and a few history makers as well, including the first Latino and the first immigrant nominated to serve as Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, the first woman nominated to lead the intelligence community, Avril Haines, and the first ever presidential envoy for climate, former Secretary of State John Kerry. Tony Blinken nominated as Biden's Secretary of State. And as CNN's Jeff Zeleny reports, on his way into that event with many of the nation's mayors, Biden revealed why he announced these cabinet picks first.
President-elect Joe Biden's cabinet is taking shape, announcing today his intention to elevate seasoned advisors from the Obama administration into new history-making roles.
Why do you go with national security first?
Because it's national security.
Before a virtual meeting with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Biden unveiling key members of his national security team, including Alejandro Mayorkas, who would become the first Latino to run the Department of Homeland Security, the agency tasked with the nation's immigration policy; Avril Haines, a former deputy CIA director, who would become the first woman to lead the nation's intelligence community as Director of National Intelligence; and John Kerry, the longtime senator and former Secretary of State, to serve as an international climate czar, a new post underscoring Biden's commitment to fighting climate change. The president-elect is wasting no time filling his team, expediting his announcements, in part, CNN has learned, because President Trump is still seeking to sabotage the outcome. Biden making clear again today he is surrounding himself with experienced hands, many of whom he's worked with for years in the Senate and White House.
And now, on a personal note, it gives me particular pleasure to introduce a man who has been my mentor, my partner, my friend, and the greatest public servant I know, the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
That's Tony Blinken, a longtime advisor, now to be nominated as Secretary of State. Jake Sullivan, another longtime aide, to be named as National Security Advisor. And Linda Thomas Greenfield, a veteran Foreign Service officer who served in posts around the world, to be U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Through the announcements, Biden is seeking to send the world a message that he intends to prioritize rebuilding America's frayed alliances.
I think it's going to be important to recognize that the confidence that our allies had and the world had in American leadership is not going to be restored overnight.
Former President Barack Obama praising Biden's pick, saying they send a signal to allies of strength and stability.
They are going to be greatly relieved and pleased to see people like Tony. There is going to be a lingering sense that America's still divided, some of the shenanigans that are going on right now around the election, that is making the world question how reliable and steady the U.S. may be.
Biden will take office in just 58 days, even though Trump's General Services Administration has declined to ascertain the outcome of the election. Today, they told congressional Democrats they would offer a briefing on the delay next week. Now, congressional Democrats are saying that that is unacceptable. But, Erica, this transition news is moving fast here. We have just confirmed a few moments ago that Janet Yellen will be nominated to be the Treasury Secretary in this administration. We're told that President-elect Biden has settled on Janet Yellen. Of course, she's the longtime head of the Federal Reserve. If confirmed, she would be the first woman to lead the Treasury Department. So this announcement will formally be coming possibly tomorrow, likely next week. But again, continuing this just expedited announcement of the Biden cabinet here, and so far filling his pledge of having a cabinet of diversity with several firsts on that list today, Erica.
Yeah, certainly. And that last tidbit there as well. Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much. Breaking moments ago, another legal defeat for the Trump team as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejected the Trump campaign's effort to block the counting of certain absentee ballots in the state, as CNN's Caitlin Collins reports.
President Trump stayed behind closed doors again today as he retreats from public view while making desperate attempts to delay the results of the election. 13 of his last 20 days have included no public events, and when he has been in front of cameras, he's refused to take questions. Publicly, it may be the quietest period of his presidency, but sources say it's anything but behind the scenes.
Thank you, Rudy.
Despite having her speak at last week's press conference, Trump's campaign is now trying to distance itself from attorney Sidney Powell after she peddled baseless conspiracy theories about voting machines and accused Georgia's Republican governor of crimes.
What we are really dealing with here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China.
Allies called Trump this weekend and urged him to drop Powell as he watched others criticize her on TV.
The conduct of the president's legal team has been a national embarrassment.
The campaign issued a statement saying Powell is not a member of the legal team or Trump in his personal capacity. But the president is still pursuing his own baseless theories and raising money while doing so. His campaign has sent 332 fundraising emails since the night of the election, claiming it's for election defense, while only a small portion goes toward his legal fights, and the rest is for his new political action committee that'll help him maintain influence in the GOP. The fundraising pitches make no mention of how Trump's campaign and its Republican allies have lost or withdrawn at least 30 cases, including when a federal judge dismissed its last major effort to delay certification of votes in Pennsylvania this weekend. Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey urged Trump to accept his loss and says he's reached out to the White House.
At some point, you exhaust those possibilities. I think the president has reached that point in Pennsylvania. He appears to have reached that point in Georgia. Michigan wasn't even close.
President-elect Joe Biden is moving ahead despite Trump's effort to hinder his transition and will announce several top national security picks tomorrow. Trump's first defense secretary, James Mattis, is offering them some advice, helping author an article in Foreign Policy magazine today that urged the new administration to drop the America First motto from its national security strategy and invest in relationships with allies.
And Erica, the Trump campaign has now suffered another legal blow because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just rejected this effort by the Trump campaign to block the counting of some 8,000 absentee ballots because they were missing information on that outer envelope that comes with those absentee ballots. And a justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said that, yes, that was a technical violation, but said it did not warrant the wholesale disenfranchisement of thousands of Pennsylvania voters.
Caitlin Collins with the latest sports. Caitlin, thank you. Joining me now to discuss CNN's Chris Cillizza and the Wall Street Journal's Sabrina Siddiqui. Sabrina, as we look at this, there really are some, history makers in the announcement that we saw from the Biden camp today. We've got the first climate envoy, the first woman to lead the intelligence community, the first immigrant to be nominated as Homeland Security Secretary. Clearly, the president-elect looking to send a message here, Sabrina.
Yes, I think that there are two concurrent themes with respect to the names that we're seeing from President-elect Joe Biden so far to serve in his administration. And one, as you note, is the history makers, the first woman to be DNI, as well as the first Latino to be at the head of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, the nomination pending for Janet Yellen, who, if confirmed, would be the first female to lead the Treasury Department. And one thing that Biden had said often on the campaign trail is that he wanted to assemble a cabinet that reflected the nation's diversity. And so some of these individuals we see, I think, reflect that commitment that he made. At the same time, we're also seeing some veterans of the Obama administration, people who have been by Biden's side for many years, if not decades, who are now returning to serve by his side when he takes office in January. People like Tony Blinken, of course, his choice for Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan, who will be his national security advisor. And I think that it goes back to Biden having a very trusted inner circle during the years that he has of experience he has cultivated in Washington.
It is Tuesday, the 24th of November of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. And it has, and it will, and so there. Yeah. Hey, looks like GSA Emily has finally relented in her indelible fashion. Whoever knew about the GSA administrator like her, huh? Who knew? Now, I did tweet out that, my undergrad degree is in constitutional history and European law, and I guess I might have missed the part of my constitutional history class and European law classes where the GSA Emilys were the ones that decided whether the elected or the president-elect was elected to be president. I might have missed that. Now, of course, people gave me, the code, the federal code. Well, that's not it. Oh, actually, it is part of the Constitution, but still. Who ever heard of this BS before this Russian asset got put into the Oval Office? There's a lot of things that we never heard about or did or even considered before this Russian asset was put into the Oval Office. Why is that? It's almost like, it was the plan. And now he's on his way out, giving Vlad even more, destroying planes that would be surveilling Vlad's entries into other countries. Which is another thing. That's the first time since World War II, when Germany took over the Sudetenland, that a country expanded its borders and gobbled up a neighboring country. During this Russian asset in the Oval Office's term. So, a lot of firsts. Of course, at the top, though, we did have the firsts in Biden's cabinet picks. But will they really be able to get through the process of the Senate? We better take the Senate. It's the only way we can get anything done. The Grim Reaper Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch McConnell, by the way. I keep telling everybody that Deripaska money goes a long way, and it's not Deripaska calling the shots. Okay? He's just the bag man. He's the money man. Okay? And looks like the whole of the GOP are bought, sold, and, compromised. Did it start with the money from the NRA that was laundered? Russian rubles laundered through the NRA and given to GOP members? Now, there might have been a Democratic member here and there who were gun rights advocates to the fore. I don't know. I don't think they did, actually. But the NRA handed out a lot of money, mostly to the GOP. And maybe that's why they didn't want to remove Trump from office. Remember when they said, "Oh, we can't remove him from office. We have to let the voters decide." Then the voters decided, and now the GOP is sitting on its hands going, "Oh, I don't know. Well, yeah, you don't know, because when this guy leaves office, it's not only him that will be under criminal investigation, and the orders don't have to come from Joe. Yeah, there's some Elliot Nesses on the job, and they will be on the job. And I hope to God that the DOJ can follow the crimes where they are. They ought to be allowed to do that. I suppose that could come from Joe. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's just going to let it run its course. What Joe is saying is that it's not the president's job to tell the DOJ who to investigate. That's what petty tyrants do. The DOJ investigates crimes and then takes people to jail for it, and then those people have to, first, before you go to jail, you got to go through a court. Okay? And I actually think that maybe Federalist Society types might consider crimes to be crimes. Let's hope so. Because that's another crime that we need to reconcile. They accuse Joe of, he's going to pack the courts. Well, you've been packing the courts, you GOP traitors to Russia. You've been packing the courts for what, 30, 40 years? F you. Excuse the invective so early in the morning. But I'm done. I'm done. Granted, there have been some even Trump-appointed jurists who ruled against him, but I'm not really confident that all those 20-somethings who were clerks last year, interns last year, now in lifetime appointments as jurists, never tried a case. And in many of these instances of these judges, they've never heard a case. And now they're in the upper echelons of the courts. No working your way up. Here, we'll slot you right in. Sort of like the embeds in the cabinet of this current Russian asset in the Oval Office. 23-year-olds running the Pentagon? Give me a break. Please. Well, yes, we have some historic firsts in those cabinet picks. We got to get Georgia. We just gotta. Well, a lot more is happening out there in the world. Looks like Eamon Bundy. You remember him? He's the he's the kid from the Bundy clan, the group that didn't want to pay grazing fees in Nevada, and held federal agents at gunpoint. Nothing happened to him. Why? Well, Obama was president. You know? And then what happened after that? Well, then as the election was underway in 2015, the campaigning and all that, Eamon Bundy and his crew took over the wildlife refuge east of me in the Malheur Wildlife Refuge up in the mountains. Yeah. Ran some federal people off and confiscated the land in a seditious taking. You had governments in the area giving them sucre, Oath Keeper cops. Yeah, that's when I first started getting all this weird stuff that I got to tell you seemed Russian to me at the time, and I made jokes about it, and turns out it was. Yeah. People purporting to be law enforcement nearby. Sure. I wish you could get those indefinite articles in your sentence structure. The and Please. What do you take me for? Anyway, so Eamon Bundy's at it again. He's got a tiki torch protest in front of the mayor of Boise because of the jackboot behavior, trying to keep people safe during a pandemic. Because apparently wearing a mask is the worst infringement upon personal freedom ever in the history of the United States of America. What idiots. Eamon Bundy. You know, I also made kind of a joke, and it's just a joke, okay? But I could care less if he got Ruby Ridged. And I know that might be a little untoward, but hey, karma is karma. It's neither good nor bad. It just is, okay? I'm just saying. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here? Because we have a curated show today. We do. Every day, as a matter of fact. Well, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yeah, what day is it? It's Tuesday, right. General Motors flipped to California's side in the state's fight against Trump to set its own fuel standards. Well, corporate America has finally come to its senses and determined, you know what, we don't have to do crazy BS anymore. We don't. People want to have cars that have high fuel standards, and they'll pay money for it, okay? It's called business. Supply and demand. A U.S. district judge voided Trump fast-track permits to build a massive methanol plant on the Columbia River, and that's in the Washington area. But hey, what the hell? And a new rule issued in the final weeks of Trump's lame duck coup will require tourists from Africa, because to the maggots, Africa is a country, to post a $15,000 bond to visit the United States. Yeah, your black pony up. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Warsaw police dragged a female photojournalist away from the women-led pro-abortion protests that have roiled Poland for months. They're mad. And after operating for 20 years, Western Union closed its 407 Cuban locations as part of a barrage of Trump-ordered sanctions against the island. He's doing everything he can to muck things up on the way out. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link right there by the social media scroll, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, maybe you could send us the equivalent of what you might spend for an espresso-type coffee drink. And if you were able to send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare. In fact, physicists have been unable to do it themselves, but we here at Netroots Radio certainly have for almost 10 years. And your generosity over all this time has allowed us to pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue resisting as the founders originally intended. So thank you to those of you who have been so generous, and for those of you who could maybe extend some of that generosity in the future, we thank you as well. You know what they say, there's no free lunch. And we're not like the other side where we just leave people holding the bag. We pay our bills because we're responsible citizens. And we thank you for allowing us really to fulfill our civic duty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media like Twitter. Indeed. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's out of the Associated Press by Tom Krischer. General Motors is switching sides in the legal fight against California's right to set its own clean air standards, abandoning the Trump administration as Trump's term nears its close. CEO Mary Barra said in a letter yesterday, Monday, to environmental groups that GM will no longer support the Trump administration in its defense against a lawsuit over its efforts against California standards, and GM is urging other automakers to do the same. The move is a sign that GM and other automakers are anticipating big changes when President-elect Joe Biden takes office in January. Already, at least one other large automaker, Toyota, said it may join GM in switching to California's team. In her letter, Barra wrote that the company agrees with Biden's plan to expand electric vehicle use. Last week, GM said it is testing a new battery chemistry that will bring down electric vehicle costs to those of gas-powered vehicles within 5 years, just in time for his second Biden administration, or maybe it would be Kamala's first. Barra sent the letter after a Monday morning conversation with Mary Nichols, head of California's Air Resources Board, the company said. The board is the state's air pollution regulator. We believe the ambitious electrification goals of the president-elect, California, and General Motors are aligned to address climate change by drastically reducing automobile emissions, the letter said. Nichols called GM's announcement good news. I was pleased to be in communication with Mary Barra again, she said. It's been a while since we talked. About 4 years, maybe? The news, coupled with GM announcing it was recalling 7 million vehicles and avoiding a drawn-out legal fight, helped to push the automaker's shares up 4% yesterday, Monday, to close at $44.77. Earlier in the day, the stock hit $45.16, its highest level in more than 2 years. GM stock has more than doubled in value since April, obviously in anticipation of a more normal United States. Johnson of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A judge yesterday, Monday, voided permits needed for a massive methanol plant on the Columbia River in southwestern Washington, agreeing with conservation groups that the project needs a more thorough environmental review. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had granted permits after massive push by Trump for the construction of an export facility that is part of a $2 billion Northwest Innovation Works plant proposed in Kalama, which is Washington State. The plant would take natural gas from Canada and convert it into methanol, and then that would be shipped to China to make olefins, which are compounds used in everything from fabrics and contact lenses to iPhones and medical equipment. Oh, wow. A deal with China? Tell me more. Conservation groups, including Columbia Riverkeeper, the Sierra Club, and Washington Environmental Council, challenged the permits in U.S. District Court in Tacoma, saying the Corps of Engineers conducted only a summary review that failed to account for the project's full environmental effects. Well, you know, the Army is being run by an acting secretary. U.S. District Judge Robert Bryan in Tacoma agreed, ordering the agency to conduct a full environmental impact statement as required by federal law. He also told the Corps to assess whether the project is in the public interest, but he rejected their argument that further review was needed under the Endangered Species Act, because obviously that's not important. It's absurd to think that a massive fracked gas refinery wouldn't pose a catastrophic risk to the fragile Columbia River ecosystem. Jared Margolis, a senior attorney for the Center for Biological Diversity, said in a news release, "These dirty fossil fuel monstrosities only accelerate climate change, and we cannot continue to allow companies to pretend otherwise." The ruling was the latest setback for the project, which, if built, would be one of the world's largest methanol plants. Last year, the Washington Department of Ecology demanded additional environmental analysis, saying that after 5 years of planning, its backers had failed to provide enough information about its greenhouse gas emissions and how they would be offset. Ted Hessen of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The outgoing administration of Donald Trump yesterday, Monday, issued a new temporary rule that would require tourist and business travelers from 24 countries, most in Africa, to pay a bond of as much as $15,000 to visit the United States. The U.S. State Department said the temporary final rule, which takes effect on December 24th and runs through June 24th, targets countries whose nationals have higher rates of overstaying B-2 visas for tourists and B-1 visas for business travelers. The Trump administration said the 6-month pilot program aims to test the feasibility of collecting such bonds and will serve as a diplomatic deterrence to overstaying the visas. Trump, who lost a re-election bid earlier this month, made restricting immigration a central part of his 4-year term in office because he's a racist. Is that in this reporter's opinion, or is that a fact? I believe in this reporter's opinion it's a fact. President-elect Joe Biden, if you didn't know, he's a Democrat, has pledged to reverse many of the Republican president's immigration policies, but untangling hundreds of changes could take months or years. Biden's transition team did not immediately respond to a request for comment related to the visa bond requirement because it's just one of many ways that Trump is trying to F up America on the way out. In this reporter's opinion, I think that's a fact. The visa bond rule will allow U.S. consular officers to require tourist and business travelers from countries whose nationals had an overstay rate of 10% or higher in 2019 to pay a refundable bond of $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 U.S. 24 countries meet that criteria, including 15 African countries. While those nations had higher rates of overstays, they sent relatively few travelers to the U.S. Historically, U.S. consular officers have been discouraged from requiring travelers to the United States to post a bond, with State Department guidance saying processing of the bonds would be cumbersome. The temporary rule said countries whose tourists and business travelers could be subject to the bond requirement include those from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, Sudan, Chad, Angola, Burundi, Djibouti, and Eritrea. Other countries include Afghanistan, Bhutan, Iran, Syria, Laos, and Yemen. Oh, just don't call it racist. Just don't. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth. This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Wade Gibbs. Public health experts shake their heads at the chaotic political divisions and inconsistent policies that have undermined attempts to control the spread of COVID-19 through much of the world. But a new study by mathematicians in Germany and the UK has applied the tools of chaos theory to show that divisions of a constructive kind could actually bring the pandemic under control much more effectively. The research was done at the University of Oxford, Göttingen University, and the Max Planck Institute for Dynamics and Self-Organization. The group built a mathematical model of coronavirus transmission that accounts for the inherently random ways that the number of infections fluctuates over time. They noticed that case counts within small populations sometimes drop all the way to zero, as long as people are wearing masks, social distancing, and taking the other standard precautions. Those spontaneous extinctions of the disease made them wonder, if the small towns or counties did more to isolate themselves from neighboring communities, would that sometimes extinguish COVID-19 enough that they could lift restrictions and resume more of normal life for longer periods until the disease popped up again? A rigorous mathematical analysis showed that, indeed, this kind of divide-and-conquer strategy can work, at least in theory. They published that result in the journal Chaos. Then, in a follow-on study published in a preprint, which has yet to be peer-reviewed, the group ran simulations using county-level data from Germany, England, Italy, New York State, and Florida. For each place, they compared two scenarios. In the first, leaders imposed statewide or nationwide restrictions, like those that Western European countries have just put back into effect. In the second scenario, restrictions on movement kick in whenever infection rates rise above a threshold, but the restrictions are applied county by county, or even neighborhood by neighborhood within large cities, so that the population is effectively subdivided into groups no bigger than 200,000 people. For example, under this alternative strategy, a big outbreak could force the Upper West Side of Manhattan to restrict non-essential movements for several weeks. But in other neighborhoods on the island, schools, offices, and restaurants could remain open, so long as case counts stayed low. The researchers found that even when they allowed for modest intermingling among communities, this approach of local control could cut by about 80% the number of days that most people would have to spend living under tough restrictions. Their models predict that these benefits of local control might take a few months to become obvious, but they also suggest that a subdivision strategy could save many, many lives over the long run. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Wade Gibbs.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day that the U.S. House of Representatives found 10 Hollywood writers and directors in contempt for alleged ties to communism. The decision was based on the House Un-American Activity Committee's finding the 10 to be in contempt the week before. More than 40 screenwriters, directors, and producers were brought before the committee to testify about the allegations of rampant communist activities in the movie-making industry. During the Cold War, fear of communism reached a fevered pitch. This included the fear that communists were infiltrating Hollywood to spread their message to the public through the movies. 10 refused to answer the committee's questions or to name names of other potential communists. Each of the 10 was fined $1,000, sentenced to a year in prison, and blacklisted from working in Hollywood. Perhaps the most well-known of the 10 was one of Hollywood's leading screenwriters, Dalton Trumbo. He served 11 months in federal prison for refusing to cooperate. While he was blacklisted, he wrote the screenplay for Roman Holiday, the romantic film starring Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn. Since Trumbo could not take credit for the film, another screenwriter friend put his name on it. Roman Holiday won the 1953 Academy Award for Best Screenplay. 3 years later, another Trumbo script, The Brave One, also received the Academy Award. Finally, in 1960, Trumbo worked on Stanley Kubrick's acclaimed film Spartacus. Kubrick refused to remove Trumbo from the credits, busting the blacklist. In 2015, actor Bryan Cranston starred in a film about Trumbo's life. During the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings, the Screen Actors Guild passed a resolution that members had to disavow any ties to the Communist Party. They also elected actor Ronald Reagan president of their union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Finally, Donald Trump on Monday said that he had told his administration to work with President-elect Joe Biden's transition team in the best interest of the country. Trump had blocked the transition process for 3 weeks as he tried to overturn the election results, challenging the vote count in several battleground states with allegations of fraud and, of course, no evidence. But he still didn't concede, although the certification of his loss in Michigan suggested his options were running out. Emily Murphy, remember her, the administrator of the General Services Administration? She wrote a letter to Joe Biden saying that the transition can begin, releasing millions of dollars in funds and clearing the way for a new administration. But, she wrote, quote, "Please know that I came to my decision independently, based on the law and the available facts. Donald Trump on Twitter explained that he had instructed Murphy to start the transition protocols, then tweeted, "I will prevail," before thanking her for her work just a few minutes later. Well, that all happened after Michigan's Board of State Canvassers certified the state's election results earlier in the day, confirming that President-elect Joe Biden won the state by about 154,000 votes. The 4-member bipartisan board approved the move in a 3-0 vote with 1 abstention. Biden now gets all of Michigan's 16 electoral votes. Biden won the state by 2.8 percentage points, larger than his margin in other states where Trump is still challenging the results, including Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden is rolling out the names of his staff, advisors, and cabinet members. His first announcement was Ron Klain as his White House chief of staff. Klain was, of course, then Vice President Biden's chief of staff and also the Obama administration's Ebola czar, experience that will come in handy as it's up to this incoming administration to get us out of this COVID mess. On Monday evening, we learned that former Fed Chair Janet Yellen is Biden's pick for Treasury. She'll be the first woman to run the Treasury Department as Treasury Secretary. An economist, Janet Yellen would also be the first person ever to serve as leader of the Treasury, the Fed, and the White House Council of Economic Advisors. So Biden's first order of business, rolling out the key members of his national security team.
Alejandro Mayorkas, who would become the first Latino to run the Department of Homeland Security, the agency tasked with the nation's immigration policy. Avril Haines, a former deputy CIA director, who would become the first woman to lead the nation's intelligence community as director of national intelligence. And John Kerry, the longtime senator and former Secretary of State, to serve as an international climate czar, a new post underscoring Biden's commitment to fighting climate change. The president-elect is wasting no time filling his team, expediting his announcements, in part, CNN has learned, because President Trump is still seeking to sabotage the outcome. Biden making clear again today he is surrounding himself with experienced hands, many of whom he's worked with for years in the Senate and White House.
And now, on a personal note, it gives me particular pleasure to introduce a man who has been my mentor, my partner, my friend, and the greatest public servant I know, the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
That's Tony Blinken, a longtime advisor, now to be nominated as Secretary of State. Jake Sullivan, another longtime aide, to be named as National Security Advisor. And Linda Thomas Greenfield, a veteran Foreign Service officer who served in posts around the world, to be U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Through the announcements, Biden is seeking to send the world a message that he intends to prioritize rebuilding America's frayed alliances.
And Biden's new transition website is finally where it belongs, at buildbackbetter.gov. And now begins the task of dismantling Donald Trump's directives. General Motors CEO Mary Barra on Monday withdrew GM's support for Trump's plans to prohibit California from using its own authority to raise fuel economy standards. In a letter she wrote to leaders of some of the biggest U.S. environmental groups, Barra wrote that the company was preparing to work with President-elect Joe Biden on his push to reduce climate warming emissions. Quote, President-elect Biden recently said, "I believe that we can own the 21st century car market again by moving to electric vehicles. We at General Motors couldn't agree more." Barra urged Toyota and Fiat Chrysler to join GM, one of the world's largest automakers, in pulling support for the Trump administration's litigation against California. Speaking of California, Senator Dianne Feinstein finally announced Monday that she will step down as the ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee next year. You may recall that she faced sharp criticism from progressives and others for her praise of Chair Lindsey Graham, crediting him for holding what she described as one of the best set of hearings that I've participated in. She was talking about the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation hearings. Wow. So, Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois is next in line for the job, followed by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. Durbin is expected to express interest in the position. I'll wait for Sheldon Whitehouse. On the COVID front, it is ugly out there. Despite dire warnings from the CDC, almost pleading with people not to travel over Thanksgiving, the TSA reported its busiest travel weekend since March. with over 3 million people traveling in the past 3 days alone. In the 9 months since February, nearly 12.4 million coronavirus cases and 256,000 fatalities have been reported in the United States. The number of coronavirus patients hospitalized across the nation shattered records on Monday, topping 85,700. Some states reporting they have no ICU beds left. Although some of the hardest hit states are beginning to report fewer new infections, Thanksgiving travel and gatherings could reverse that trend. Even after cases peak, deaths continue rising for several weeks. So maybe this year we all just stay home and have a virtual Thanksgiving? Just a suggestion. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Brrr, a little foggy too. Well, we're going to have cloudy skies for most of the day and partly cloudy this afternoon with highs near the low 50s. Winds will be light and variable, and then steady rain this evening with lows in the upper 30s. Showers continuing overnight with about a quarter inch of rain expected. And then cloudy with occasional rain showers tomorrow for another, maybe a quarter inch. And we'll have a high only in the mid-30s tomorrow. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now spiked. Yesterday, we didn't have the full totals from the weekend, but we stood at 3,200 something. Well, now we're at 3,426 with 23 deceased. It was only just a few weeks ago we had 1 confirmed dead, and now we have 23 confirmed, which sadly is still a gross undercount. Pollen is rated at none right outside the window here at the mothership in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is only moderate, a lot of wood smoke being emitted because people are cold. I don't blame them. And the air quality index, once again, is moderate at 54 parts per million, which is not healthy for those with unhealthy breathing conditions. The daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.22 inches. Visibility is down to 2 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 52 and partly cloudy. Paris is 48 and sunny. Rome is 58 and sunny. Kyiv is 42 and fair. Kabul is 36 with a light drizzle. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 52 with a rain shower. Sydney, Australia is 66 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Police detained several people and charged a female photojournalist with assaulting a police officer as women-led protests over abortion rights flared up again yesterday, Monday, in Poland. Soon after the protest in Warsaw began, police arrived and forcibly removed people, including photojournalist Agata Krybowska. It was the first case of a reporter being detained during the month of protests that have rocked Poland after a high court ruled in favor of a near-total abortion ban. Officers dragged Krybowska away as bystanders called on them to stop, saying that she was a journalist. A large group then gathered outside the police station in central Warsaw, where she was taken, rallying on her behalf as they waited hours for her release. After she was let go, she said that she was charged with assaulting an officer, something she denied. In video footage of the incident circulating in Polish media, Krybowska does not appear to act aggressively to the officers. She told the Associated Press that an officer appeared to be angered by her use of a flash when she took photos, and then he kicked her, the videos showed.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Andrea Rodriguez and Danica Cota of the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Western Union closed its 407 locations across Cuba yesterday, Monday. A sanctions-driven move that will leave thousands bereft of remittances on an island that depends heavily on them, or will force them to use less reliable ways to bring in money. The closure of offices that have operated for more than 20 years in Cuba resulted from a barrage of sanctions that the administration of Donald Trump imposed while courting conservative Cuban-American voters in Florida ahead of the November 3rd election. The problem is not only the closure of Western Union, but that Western Union is practically the only U.S. to Cuba provider of remittance payments, said Manuel Orozca, director of the Center for Migration and Economic Stabilization at Creative Associates International, a development-oriented advisory firm in Washington, D.C. The impact will be felt, he added. While Cuba does not publish figures on remittances, economists estimate it receives billions of dollars a year, and Orozco said that roughly half comes from the U.S. and 20% of the overall total through Western Union. Some Cubans said they were taken aback by the imminent closures despite the sanctions being announced in late October. 82-year-old retiree Luis Nunez said he found out when his son called him on Sunday night and deposited $200 for him. Many lamented the closures and the need to find less convenient or more costly alternatives. Family and friends abroad can still use other banks, agencies, and small informal businesses to send money to people in Cuba. or relay it through visitors traveling to the island through Havana's airport, which opened this month. They've even used cryptocurrency, noted Cuban economist Omar Evanly Perez. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.